The laughter that echoed across the grand dining hall of the Royal Crest Hotel wasn't the kind that brought joy. It was sharp, cold, and soaked in arrogance. The chandeliers above shimmered faintly, their golden light unable to hide the discomfort that spread through the air. In the middle of that glittering hall stood a young waitress, Mera Est, her hands trembling as she clutched a silver tray close to her chest. Only 3 weeks into her job, she had never imagined that she would become the center of attention in a room filled with some of the most powerful men in the film industry. She wasn't meant to be seen, she wasn't meant to speak, but sometimes fate chooses the quiet ones to remind the world what dignity truly looks like. Mera had come from a small coastal town where the sea met dreams that never sailed far. Her father was a fisherman, a man of few words and endless strength, while her mother was a school teacher who taught English to children who couldn't even afford notebooks. Mera grew up surrounded by words, by the magic of language, by the belief that knowledge could one day lift her beyond the borders of poverty. She had learned 3 languages fluently and dreamed of becoming a translator for international films. But when her father's health failed and bills began piling up like waves in a storm, her dreams were forced to pause. College had to wait, and life demanded something simpler: survival. So she came to the city, found work at the Royal Crest, and started serving coffee and clearing tables for people who rarely looked her in the eye. She worked quietly, gracefully, with a smile that hid her exhaustion. Every night, she would whisper a prayer for strength and remind herself of her mother's words. Even if they don't see your worth, never forget it yourself. That night, the hotel was hosting a private dinner for international film investors, a grand event arranged by none other than Victor Brull, a billionaire producer known for discovering stars and destroying egos in equal measure. He was a man people admired publicly and feared privately. His charm was like glass, shining from a distance, but sharp to those who stood too close. Mera didn't plan to cross his path. She simply wanted to serve and disappear. But destiny has its own script, and that evening, it had written something entirely different for her. The translator hired for the event failed to arrive, leaving the guests struggling to communicate with one of the foreign investors. Victor, impatient and irritable, decided to use a translation app, but the device butchered every sentence, turning serious financial terms into absurd phrases. What began as annoyance soon became entertainment for him. He leaned back, smirking, waving the printed contracts like a toy. "Can anyone here translate this?" he asked loudly, his tone mocking. The men around him laughed, a kind of laughter that burned through the air. Then his eyes landed on Mera. She stood quietly near the corner, holding a tray of glasses. "You," he said, pointing, "you've been standing there long enough. Come here, translate this, and maybe I'll make you a director." The hall burst into cruel laughter. Every eye turned to her, expecting her to blush, to mumble an apology, to shrink away. For a moment, she almost did. But somewhere deep inside her, beneath the fear and the shame, a spark lit up. Her mother's voice whispered again, "Don't let them decide your worth." Mera placed the tray down, stepped forward, and gently took the paper from Victor's hand. The laughter softened into silence. Her hands trembled, but her eyes didn't waver. She began to read, slowly at first, then with growing confidence. Her voice, calm yet powerful, filled the hall. She didn't just translate the words, she interpreted them, corrected their context, explained their meaning with precision and grace. Even the investor on the other side of the call looked surprised as she rephrased a few misunderstood terms, saving a deal that was seconds away from collapsing. By the time she finished, you could hear a pin drop. Victor's smirk was gone.
The arrogance in the room had dissolved, replaced by quiet disbelief. "Where did you learn that?" he asked, his tone stripped of mockery. Mera smiled faintly and said, "At home. My mother was a teacher." The foreign investor applauded through the screen, and one by one, the men in tuxedos followed. In that moment, the girl they had laughed at became the woman they respected, though few would admit it aloud. She handed the papers back and quietly stepped away, her heart pounding but her dignity intact. When the dinner ended, Mera returned to the service corridor, her eyes stinging with tears she refused to let fall. She didn't expect anything, no apology, no reward, but life has a way of surprising those who act with quiet courage. As she was stacking trays, a woman approached her, older, graceful, with kind eyes. Mr. Brandl's team was impressed, she said warmly. They'd like you to come for an interview tomorrow. We're offering you a position as a language consultant. Mera blinked, certain she had misheard, but when the woman handed her a business card with an official seal, reality struck. That night, she sat on her small bed in the staff quarters, her uniform folded neatly beside her, tears finally streaming down her cheeks. She thought of her mother's chalk-stained hands and her father's weathered smile. She whispered softly, "You were right, Mama. No one can take away what's in your mind." The next morning, she walked into the film studio for her interview, nervous yet determined. The glass building gleamed with luxury, but she carried something far more precious: her self-belief. During the test, her translations stunned the evaluators. Her articulation was flawless, her understanding deep, her humility striking. Within hours, she was hired. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months. Mera's insights began to reshape scripts, refine dialogues, and add emotional depth to international films. Her name started circulating quietly in creative meetings. And then one day, a director requested her to co-develop a screenplay. At first she hesitated. That old doubt whispered, "You're just a waitress who got lucky." But she silenced it with the same courage that had once silenced a room full of arrogance. A year later, the film premiered, and among the glittering audience sat Victor Brandl. The same man who had once mocked her now watched as her name appeared on the screen. Associate Director and Language Consultant Mera Est. The crowd stood in applause. Victor lowered his gaze, realizing that true power doesn't come from wealth or fame. It comes from grace, from integrity, from believing in yourself when no one else does. When Mera was asked how her journey began, she smiled softly and said, "Someone once asked me to translate something if I wanted to be a director. I did, but what I truly translated was the difference between mockery and belief." That day, her story became a symbol, not of revenge, but of quiet triumph. A story that whispered to every dreamer, every struggler, every soul that's ever been overlooked. Don't let the laughter of others drown your voice. Sometimes the smallest step of courage can rewrite your destiny. If this story touched your heart, take a moment to share it, because every time you do, you remind the world that kindness, self-worth, and grace can outshine power, arrogance, and cruelty. This was the story of Mera Est, the girl who turned humiliation into hope and silence into strength.